All right, so get this. We're diving into the world of Lincoln pennies today. Those little copper guys,
Those are the ones,
the
yeah.
ones we all have stashed somewhere. Well, get ready because apparently they're causing a bit of a market frenzy.
It really is remarkable how a simple YouTube video has sparked such a reaction.
Oh, yeah. You talking about that? This happened after Trump announced the end of the Lincoln penny market goes berserk video.
That's the one from the BlueRidgeSilverhound channel.
Oh, I saw that one. The host, Sean, he's got that energy. He's all about how the Lincoln penny's being discontinued and the market's gone crazy.
Right, and that's where things get interesting. While the video might not be totally accurate about the penny being discontinued, it's definitely caused some real market movements. For example, people are pre-selling rolls of 2025 pennies on eBay for crazy prices.
Really?
And get this, those pennies haven't even been minted yet.
Hold on, so people are buying something that doesn't even exist? That's wild.
It is pretty wild.
What's going on?
Well, it's a classic case of FOMO fear, of missing out.
Ah, FOMO.
It happens all the time. You see it especially in markets for collectibles. People see others making money and they just don't want to be left behind. It's like a digital gold rush.
Oh, I can see that. So it's not even about the pennies themselves, really. It's more about not missing out on some big payout. But what makes these pennies so special in the first place?
Well, there are a few things at play. First, the video itself creates a sense of scarcity, even though, like we said, it's not totally accurate.
Okay.
Sean even highlights a 2025 proof Lincoln penny that was listed for over $600.
Whoa. Over $600 for one penny.
Yeah, proof set is a special set of coins made by the mint with a mirror-like finish, just for collectors.
Okay.
They make them in limited quantities, which of course adds to their value.
Ah, that makes sense. So it's like those limited edition sneakers or a rare comic book. Scarcity drives up the price. But is there anything actually backing up this surge in value for pennies, or is it all hype?
Well, it's not entirely unfounded. If you look at the U.S. Mint's mintage report for 2025, you'll see that they're producing way fewer pennies than in previous years.
Okay.
This, combined with the rumors that they might stop making pennies completely, adds to that perception of scarcity, even if the discontinuation isn't true.
Okay, so there's real data behind this, not just speculation. But even if pennies do become scarce, are we talking life-changing money here? Like, should I be digging through my couch cushions right now?
Uh-huh. Well, that's where things get a little more complicated.
Yeah.
While there might be some potential for profit, there's a bigger economic picture to consider. Things like inflation and the price of copper, those all factor into the value of pennies too.
Right, so even if the penny itself isn't worth much, the metal it's made of could be valuable, especially those pre-1982 pennies, the ones that are mostly copper, right?
You got it. Before 82, pennies were made mostly of copper. And with copper prices going up, those older pennies are literally worth more than their face value just for their metal content.
So it's like having a tiny gold mine in your pocket. Didn't Sean in the video also mention that the U.S. government might let people melt down those copper pennies like they did in Canada?
He did bring that up. And it's not entirely impossible. Canada stopped making pennies in 2013, and they did allow people to melt down their copper pennies,
Okay.
which actually made the value go up for a bit because everyone was trying to get their hands on them for the copper.
Wow, so there is some precedent for this happening. But wait, if everyone starts melting down their pennies, wouldn't that just flood the market with copper and make the price go down?
That's a good point. You always have to consider market manipulation and how supply and demand work. It's not as simple as just finding a rare penny. It's about understanding the entire market.
So it's a bit more complicated than Sean made it sound in his video. It's not just pennies are valuable, go get them.
Exactly. While there might be some good opportunities out there, it's important to be skeptical and understand how markets work. It's not some get-rich-quick scheme.
Okay, starting to see the bigger picture here. This isn't just about pennies. It's about understanding markets, information, and how our own decisions can be affected. This is actually a lot more interesting than I thought it'd be.
It really is a fascinating case study. This little coin can tell us so much about psychology, economics, and even the power of social media.
For sure. And speaking of social media, this whole thing seems to be driven by it. People are seeing those videos and those eBay listings, and they're getting swept up in it.
Absolutely. It shows how information, even misinformation, can spread so fast online and actually influence what people do in the real world.
So it's not just about knowing your pennies, it's about being smart with information and making good decisions. This is getting deep.
It is, and we're just scratching the surface. But before we go any further, I want to ask you something. If this much hype can be made around something as common as a penny, What does that say about how we view value and scarcity, especially in a world that's changing so fast?
That's a great question. It's like we're wired to look for value, even in the most random places. And maybe in a world where everything feels so digital, there's something comforting about holding on to something physical, something with a history.
It is interesting, isn't it? Maybe this whole penny thing is more than just market speculation. Maybe it reflects our need for stability and something real in a world that can feel pretty chaotic and uncertain. But to really dig into that, we need to go deeper into the psychology behind it all.
Okay, we've talked about the market and those mintage reports, but I'm still stuck on this psychology angle. It just feels like there's something more here, Like it's not just about making money.
You're right. There's definitely more to it. Remember that part in Sean's video where he talks about people laughing at those who are saving all those copper pennies?
Yeah.
Now he's saying those people might get the last laugh.
Yeah, it's like those people who seemed a little off are now the smart ones.
Yeah,
But isn't it possible some people just knew those pennies would be worth something someday?
that's a great point. And it actually connects to something called hindsight bias. It's basically our tendency to look back and think things were more predictable than they were.
Yet we knew it all along.
Exactly. We kind of rewrite our memories and tell ourselves we saw it coming.
So, looking back now, it's easy to say, of course those copper pennies were going to be valuable, but back then it probably wasn't so obvious.
Right. And that's part of why Sean's story is so catchy. He makes it seem like those people who saved pennies were geniuses, even if they were just lucky.
I see. But even if they were just lucky, there's still a ton of excitement around all this. Sean's really good at getting people fired up about it.
He is. And there's another psychological thing at play here called availability bias. Remember when he talked about those rare Jefferson nickels from 2024?
The ones that are worth thousands of dollars.
Yeah, those. He's basically using that to make people think any penny could be a hidden treasure. And because he's such a good storyteller, those scenarios really stick in our minds.
So even though it's probably super rare to find a really valuable penny, Sean's making it seem like it could happen to anyone.
That's it. And because we hear those stories, we tend to think they're more likely to happen, even if they're not. That's what availability bias is all about.
So he's using two psychological tricks to make people excited and get them to act fast. Pretty smart, even if it's maybe a little misleading. You mentioned before that all this hype can be risky, though. What did you mean by that?
One of the biggest risks, especially in a market driven by hype, is market manipulation. When something's value is based on what people think, it's really easy for someone to manipulate that.
You mean like those pump and dump things with stocks?
Exactly. With pennies, it could be something like spreading rumors about a certain type of penny being super rare, or even making fake ones to drive up demand.
Oh, that's kind of scary. So it's not just about finding a valuable penny. You have to know how to avoid scams and not get caught up in the hype.
That's right. And this is where being media literate is so important, especially now with social media. We need to be able to look at information online and know what's real and what's not, and also understand why someone might be sharing that information.
So we can't just get excited about pennies. We need to be informed and a little skeptical too. It's like we need a whole new set of skills just to be online these days.
It does feel that way sometimes, doesn't it?
Yeah.
This whole penny thing really shows how information, real or fake, can spread so quickly online and have a real impact. It makes you realize how important critical thinking and research skills are. Oh, and being skeptical definitely helps.
Okay, so I'm definitely feeling more cautious now, but honestly, I'm even more interested in this whole thing now. It's like this tiny coin is a window into something much bigger, psychology markets and how we get information in the digital age.
You got it. It's amazing how something as simple as a penny can lead to such a complex discussion. But before we go too deep down this rabbit hole, maybe we should talk about the bigger implications of this whole thing.
You mean like what this penny craze says about us as a society?
Exactly. We've talked about psychology in the market, but there's a bigger question here. What does this sudden interest in pennies, these real objects, tell us about what we value, especially in a world that's becoming more and more digital?
That is a good question. In a world where so much is virtual, are we missing something real? Something we can actually hold?
That's an interesting thought. Maybe it's more than just a trend. Maybe it shows how much we need things that feel secure and stable, especially when the world feels so uncertain.
I like that idea. Maybe in a world that feels chaotic, those pennies remind us of a time when things were simpler, more grounded.
It's definitely something to think about.
Yeah.
And to really understand that idea, we need to look at the history of money value and our relationship with physical stuff.
Okay, so we've covered a lot of ground here. The YouTube video, the market stuff, the psychology, and even the potential risks. But I keep coming back to that big question you brought up. What does this whole penny thing really tell us about us? About society, I mean.
Yeah, it's a fascinating question, isn't it? I mean, think about it. We're living in a world where everything's digital, information overload constantly. Value feels kind of abstract, you know?
Hmm.
So maybe this whole thing with pennies, it's a sign that we're craving something more real, something we can actually hold on to.
Like we're yearning for a simpler time when things made more sense, when value was something you could actually touch and see.
That's it. And maybe there's a sense of security that comes with holding on to something physical, something that's been around for generations. In a world that feels so unpredictable, maybe those little pennies represent stability, a little reminder of a time when a penny actually meant something.
I like that idea. It's like a kind of nostalgia for a time when things were more straightforward. But doesn't that clash with the whole get rich quick aspect of this frenzy? People aren't just collecting pennies for sentimental reasons, they want to make a profit too.
You're right. And that's where it gets really interesting. It's like we're caught between these two opposing forces, the pull of the past and the push towards the future. On one hand, we want something real, something with history. But on the other hand, we're still driven by that desire for fast money, for not missing out on the next big thing, just like with those digital markets.
It's like these two forces are smashing together in this whole penny craze. It's not just about the pennies themselves, it's about what they represent in this bigger picture of shifting values and uncertainty about the economy.
You nailed it. It all boils down to this. What do we truly value in a world that's constantly changing? What gives us that feeling of security and stability when everything around us feels like it's in flux?
Those are some big questions. And honestly, I don't know if there are any easy answers, but maybe this penny thing is a way for us to wrestle with those questions, to explore how we think about value and scarcity and our connection to the physical world in this digital age.
I think you're onto something there. And for our listener who's been with us on this deep dive, I think there's a lot to take away from all this.
Definitely. So, for those who might be thinking about joining the penny hunt, what are some things they should keep in mind?
Well, first things first, remember that market trends are often based on speculation and emotions running high. Do your research, understand the history, and don't just blindly follow the hype.
Yeah, and be careful about those get rich quick schemes.
Yeah,
Just because someone on YouTube is making it sound easy doesn't mean it is. There's always risk involved, especially in this kind of market.
exactly. And maybe most importantly, ask yourself why you're doing it. Are you genuinely interested in pennies and their history? Or are you just trying to make a quick buck? Be honest with yourself about your motivations. Don't let FOMO make the decisions for you.
Great advice. And I think that applies to way more than just pennies. It's about being a smart consumer of information, understanding how markets work, and recognizing our own biases.
Couldn't have said it better myself. This whole penny thing is like a tiny version of the world we live in. It reminds us that we need to be informed, think critically, and have a healthy dose of skepticism.
Absolutely. So next time you see a penny lying on the ground, don't just walk by, pick it up, take a look, and think about the story it's telling. It's a story about history, about economics, about human psychology, and maybe even a little bit about ourselves.
I like that. And who knows, maybe you'll find yourself getting caught up in the penny craze too. Just remember to have fun with it, do your research, and be aware of those market forces and your own motivations.
Well said. This has been a really interesting deep dive. It's amazing how much we can learn from something as simple as a penny.